Hello, my name is David Modler, and I'm back. This is the fourth video in a series of 5 that I'm shooting for the Delaplaine. So I live in Brockville, Maryland, but I'm originally from Baltimore. Currently, I work full-time at Shepherd University in West Virginia, where I work in the Department of Contemporary Art and Theater. I coordinate the art education program for Shepherd, as well as teaching a foundations program, teaching drawing, design, printmaking for the most part. I've also, for the last 3 years or so, been working at the Delaplaine and developing some curriculum for them for some adult weekend courses and for kids camps. So the weekend courses have been in the genre of experimental drawing and mixed media paint applications, and then also with the visual journal, which is one of my primary studio activities. And then with kids, it's anything from drawing and painting and collage to ceramics and zines and artist trading cards, visual journals, so a whole lot of different activities that I've been coordinating there at the Delaplaine. So what I've been doing with these videos is creating a series of videos that you can watch online that give you some basic tips for working in a visual journal. So these are great for whether you already have a visual journal practice and you're just looking to maintain it, or if you're looking to start a visual journal practice. All of these videos can be helpful in getting some of these processes and techniques together to work through that. So the first video I shot was on basic watercolor application. So it discussed washes, mixing, blending, and doing textured applications with brushes to get pages started in your book. The second video dealt with experimental watercolor applications. So in that video, I did a demo with bubble wrap as a printing matrix that you could work with. Also, that video discussed working with salt as a way to apply that to wet paint and get a crystallizing effect. I also discussed and showed an example of a rubbing alcohol technique that you can do by dropping with an eyedropper with a brush, dripping rubbing alcohol into watercolor paint while it's wet, giving you even another effect to the watercolor paint on the page. Unfortunately, I didn't have any rubbing alcohol at the time with the pandemic and could not find any, so maybe you have some in your home and you can give that one a shot if you'd like to. And then with the third video that I shot, I was just talking about watercolor pencils and different ways that you could use watercolor pencils in combination with water, with paint, with water-based markers and highlighters, and then also by just taking the material, dipping it in water and applying it to the paper. So my idea is that these videos build upon each other. So if you start with this video, you might want to go back and check out the first 3 and work your way up to this one, because what I'll show you today is going to sort of build upon what's already been talked about. So we're going to talk about some image transfer techniques, ways to take images that you might have and put them into your journal work without just gluing this paper version of the image into the book. There's 2 different things I want to show you. One of those processes works with regular clear packaging tape, and the other one works with a pen. It's a blender pen. It's a chart pack blender pen. So it's a particular type of marker that you would need. The reason that these pens work is they have a solvent in them that helps dissolve the material that's in the print and transfers it onto the paper. You're also going to want some water. You need something to burnish with. Either a bone folder or a wooden spoon works perfectly fine for that. And I also have my brush just in case I need that for helping with one of the tape transfers. So the one I want to do first is working with the image transfer that deals with tape. So before I do that, just a quick discussion about the images. So these are images that I found. This is one that I actually made. So it's a drawing I made, and then I photocopied it on a Xerox machine. This was an image that was on a CD cover, I think, and then I photocopied it, and it's been scaled down to this smaller size. For either one of these image transfer techniques, I usually don't work with images that are much bigger than my hand. They're both a little bit labor intensive, so you don't want to work with big giant images. Just takes a long time, and there's always the chance that the material just isn't going to work out the way you want it to. But with these smaller items, it tends to be pretty successful, and you get some interesting results from these. So the reason that I photocopy these is that you need the images to be toner-based images. So if you have a printer at home that's a inkjet printer, it's not going to work for this process because the ink that's in that printer is actually a liquid ink, and it's not going to work because it'll dissolve when you're trying to work with it. Both of these images were done on a photocopier, so the photocopy is done with toner, which is a different kind of material. It's actually a granular material. It's literally a granular plastic that when the paper goes through the machine and the scanner is taking the image and reproducing it onto that paper, it's heat sensitizing the paper in the areas where the toner needs to be, and then in those split seconds that it runs through the machine, comes out the other end with your image. So a laser printer will also give you the kind of image that you want for both of these processes, but Xerox machine or a laser printer. So if you find some images you want to work with, find a way to get them photocopied, and they'll both work for these processes. I also have this cutting mat. It's a self-healing cutting mat. I'm going to use that just as a surface to prepare these prints so that you can see it maybe a little bit better. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to pull this tape out. So the sticky side is up, and I'm going to lay this down sticky side up. So this is the sticky part. And I'm going to take my image and I'm going to lay it face down into this tape. What I'm going to have to do is cut this so that I can add a second piece of tape, because you can see that it isn't enough right here to cover it. So I'm going to grab my X-Acto blade, and I'm just going to cut that tape right there. There, we got it. And I'm going to pull out a second piece and then apply this so that it overlaps. So it's okay to let the tape overlap. Hopefully you can see where that tape is overlapping, and I'm going to free it from the roll, and then I have this image fully covered with the tape, and I can start getting it ready for doing the actual transfer. So I'm actually going to want a pair of scissors to cut this. So if you have a pair of scissors, that's going to work just fine for this next step. So I'm going to take this. I don't have to worry about cutting the image out perfectly. I can cut it out so that it's more rectangular, because I can always come back and trim this. And that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to trim this down so that it's more in a square format. And as I do that, all of this extra tape is going to get taken away. So I'm not going to have to worry about all of this extra sticky waste tape that's right here. I can throw that away. And what that does is it helps get all the sticky stuff out of the way, so that this image doesn't accidentally stick to my journal and rip something. Whole front of this is covered with the tape. I've trimmed it, and then I'm going to burnish the back of this with my bone folder. So I'm just going to rub on it. What this is going to do is encourage that toner to really stick well to the tape. And if there were any little air bubbles that occurred while I was doing this, it's going to pop them right out of that process. So there's that burnished image. What I usually do is I just then take the image and just put it in water. You just let it soak for a few seconds. Doesn't really matter if it's warm or cold water, but letting it soak for a few seconds is a good way to get the process to move forward. And then just using my fingers, I'm going to rub the back of this picture. And as I do that, the paper is going to start to pill and roll up, and I can get the paper to just roll right off the back of the tape. If you're having trouble with the paper coming off, you can always add a little bit more water. That's why I have my brush. I can just add a little water with my brush, and then can continue rubbing on this image to remove this paper. So the paper that the print was on to begin with just acts as a carrier for this image. And by applying the tape to it, I'm able to encourage the toner to release from the paper and stick to the tape. And it makes like a little sticker. So this is a little bit sticky still on the back, but you're still going to want to use a little bit of glue stick to put it into something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move to a spot in my book where I already did some demo stuff from some of the past workshops, and I'm going to take this picture and add it into something that I've already done. The thing that I like the most about doing transfers, if it's still wet, you just want to dry it off, but the thing that I like to do most with transfers is once I've made the transfers, find a spot in my journal where I'd like that image to go. Sometimes I already know where I want it to go, or I find a very specific image that I want to put into my journal, and sometimes it's just random. So it just depends on what you're doing and what your intent is. And the thing that I like about this is if I were just to glue this down onto the blank paper, it would be pretty much the same thing as collaging the image in to begin with. The thing that's nice about creating the transfer is I can now put this into my journal in some kind of a way so that it reacts and interacts with other images that are there. So I'm going to put it right here. And you can see I just laid it down. And then I'm still gonna burnish it, but before I burnish it, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little sheet of paper, put it over top so I don't scratch up the image. I'm just gonna burnish it. What this will do is really glue it down well. And then I can still see the color coming through, and now I have this image overlapping there in my book. So the tape transfer is one way that you can transfer an image. I consider the tape transfer to be the final step. So you already have something in your book and you're adding this to the top of that. It really works like the top layer. There isn't anything you can really add to this material. I've tried to do Sharpie pen, paint. It always seems to scratch off. So if you use a tape transferred image, make sure you're doing that as the top layer of something, because it's very difficult to get anything else to want to sort of build on top of it. The cool thing about the tape transfer too is that it would work with magazine images as well. It takes a little bit more rubbing on the back. Make sure you're using your finger, not your nail, because you'll scratch it if you use your nail. It takes a little bit of rubbing, maybe a little bit more water, a little bit more soaking time to get through the sizing that's on the paper from something that was from a magazine, but same process, and you can get an image right out of a magazine, and the color will also transfer to the tape. The second technique I want to show you is working with these pens, these solvent pens that are called Chart Pack is the brand name. I'm going to take this image and I'm going to add it right into this part of this page over here. So I can cap the pen. It has a very strong odor, so my recommendation is to work with something small. Size of your hand is usually about as big as you want to get, and if you're susceptible to smelly kind of like chemical smells, maybe you want to make sure you're doing it in a well-ventilated area, maybe even outdoors on the patio or something is a better way to work with this, so that if the smell is something that's troubling for you. So I'm just using these pens. I usually have 2 of them because as you work with them, they do run out. And if you have 2 of them right on hand as you're working, even if they run out, you can quickly switch to another pen to make sure you get your print made. So I'm just using the solvent to add this picture into my book. So you can see that the image starts to show up through the back of the paper. So the image started face down, and I'm going to use the burnisher again to burnish this, just to encourage that toner to move off of the paper and into the book. And then I can also pick up this paper. I'm going to hold it here so that it stays lined up, but I can check and see how the image is starting to come through, and it looks like it's coming through pretty well. So I might add a little bit more material and then finish up with this print. So to kind of recap, as I'm finishing this, tape transfers and solvent transfers, they both work with toner-based images, so photocopier or a Xerox machine or a laser printer is what you need to create the image. With the tape transfer, you could also use magazine images. Those will work for that process as well. And the thing that I like about the solvent transfer is it puts the image right into the book, but then I can also still work on top of this. So if I wanted the Jeep, it's a little Jeep picture, if I wanted this little box to show up right here, I could still add yellow marker right to the top of it, and then the image, the toner image that was transferred, isn't going to move or get messed up at all. It'll just stay right there. So 2 more techniques for you to give a try. Working with images of your own, tape transfer and the solvent transfer. You do need the chart pack pen. It's a very specific blender pen for that one, but with the packaging tape, just regular clear packaging tape works great for those. Works with the photocopies, the toner-based images, and magazines. This one is only going to work with ones that are out of a photocopier. Trying to do it with a magazine picture, it's just not going to get through the sizing on that paper. So thanks for checking out my video. Have fun working in your journal, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.